Thank you very much for joining us today. We are hosting this webinar by Globevisa Group, and the topic is Will Trump's 5 million gold card and EB-5. And my name is Willow Liu. I'm an in-house immigration attorney here at Globevisa. I'm admitted in New York to practice law, and before joining Globevisa, I was an immigration attorney in New York. And today we have a great guest speaker, Mr. David Hirson. He has over 40 years experience in immigration law, and his expertise will shed some light on the hot topic of this week and the last week. So before we move into our conversation, I would like to take a moment to introduce our company, Globevisa, and we'll dive right into the hot topic. And then I will also share a little extra information about the EB-5 RIA of 2022, and we'll reserve some time at the end of the session for Q&A. So if you have any question, feel free to comment in the comment section, and we will address them accordingly at the end of the session. And if you are not registered through a consultant, there's also a form in the comment section you can click on to get in touch with us. And yeah, let's get started. So Globevisa is a Singapore-based immigration consultancy service provider, which was founded in 2002. We specialize in various immigration programs meticulously curated by our team and experts. With over 50 offices in 13 countries, we have offices in major cities in Asia, America, European, and Oceania. Globevisa really offer a truly global perspective, and we are dedicated to help our client to achieve their immigration dreams. And we offer services in citizenship, residency, and also acquiring real estate in foreign countries. We have over 800 employees, and we have successfully assisted over 100K clients in the past. And now it's the time to introduce our great speaker today, Mr. David Hirson. He has been practicing immigration law for over 40 years, and he has been rated for super lawyer for 15 years, and he's the founder of David Hirson and Partners, LLP. I'm just going to pass the floor to Mr. Hirson to have a little introduction of himself.
Well, thank you, Willow, and thank Globevisa for inviting me to do a presentation. I look forward to sharing some of the latest stuff with the audience. I am able to tell you that I have experienced the US immigration program. I was a lawyer overseas out of the US, and I came into the United States in 1979, and I'd passed the California bar, and I began practicing immigration law. In 1990, I was visiting Washington, D.C. with a colleague. We decided to take a walk over to the Senate and see what was going on. Well, we went into the Judiciary Committee, and two senators, this is June 1990, were debating whether or not to have an EB-5 program. And those two senators were the late Senator Kennedy and the former President Biden. So it was very early in the program. By the late November of 1990, the EB-5 program for direct investment was introduced. And in January of the next year, 1991, I filed one of the very first EB-5 cases in the country. I've been involved in EB-5 ever since at all levels, whether it's litigating with the government, whether it's lobbying with the Congress, whether it is making representations to immigration about the wording of the regulations, and there are different processes, attended meetings all over. I've traveled to China at least 25 times and been to about 35 cities. So I'm familiar with a lot of the culture there and the understanding of how some Chinese folks think about this program and what their goals and objectives are. My people on this first immigration EB-5 case were back in the office with their conditional residents within 6 months. This is unheard of today, but we know what could be done if everybody did their jobs properly. So with that, I have had this immigration law practice, which is one of the larger boutique practices specializing in EB-5 in the country. And before COVID, we were probably one of the largest filers of EB-5 cases, filing hundreds of cases a month. That, of course, has quietened down because of all the political and legal stuff that's gone on, but we are still very active in the area. I'm published in various books, and I look forward to answering your questions and giving you information tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to express our gratitude again for having you here. It's a great honor that you agreed to attend this webinar, and we're excited to have a more conversation about the goat card, which has been the hot topic for the past week or two. So, yeah, so basically what had happened is that President Donald Trump announced that he is going to start a program to offer a gold card, which costs $5 million and providing investor a path to citizenship. Well, a lot of investors have been raising some concerns about this program and how that is going to have an impact on the current EB-5 programs. And someone like you have extensive experience in this area can definitely shed some light on how this kind of a surprise program would impact this long existing immigration system of EB-5. So we prepared some questions and we're just going to go through them, and then hopefully we can bring more clearance for our audience. So yeah. So
Cool.
the most question people ask is, can he do this? Does he have the power to just create a go-kart program out of blue without the Congress?
Well, let me give you a little history. 2 weeks ago, he announced in his office that they're going to have this new gold card. The Secretary of Commerce was there and made some ridiculously outdated statements about EB-5. The following day, they had a cabinet meeting, and the whole concept of this gold card was continued, where they believe they will receive trillions of dollars to set aside the whole of the US deficit. So we needed to start analyzing. My phone started ringing, and everybody was panicking because they had mentioned in one of the points that there would be a replacement of EB-5. Well, a couple of things about that, and this answers your question. It can't be done by stroke of a pen by an executive order. This is an act of Congress. It's the law of the land. To change the law of the land, it'll have to have an act of Congress or a Supreme Court decision to set it aside, neither of which are even slightly likely. But again, with the Trump administration, nothing is impossible. So looking at that, I would say you do not need to worry about the EB-5 program. EB-5 is there to stay, and the power of Mr. Trump, as you've seen with some of the latest court cases, is immediately being stopped by some of the courts, including the Supreme Court, which is made up of all his appointees, at least a majority. So I'm not worried that that will happen. So the procedures he has to go through, he's got to create something where immigration at least creates a form with some form of instructions, even if there are no actual regulations. And on that basis, receive these funds into US Treasury as the way they've structured it. Now, this is not an investment, and this doesn't seem to be clear, and I've had this clarified in a number of ways in the last few days. This is not an investment. It's a donation to the US government. You do not get your money back. So you, in fact, are buying residence. It will then allow you to go on to citizenship. You still have to prove your source of funds to the nth degree, the same as with EB-5. And with 5 million, it's that much more difficult than 800,000 or 1,050,000. So basically, we have a lot of obstacles to overcome. On the other side, on the EB-5 side, he's going to have to get an act of Congress to set it aside. So I think a little further in the questions we'll come to talk about more on that. So elaboration on this, please let me know, Willa.
Definitely. I think that's a very great answer to kind of solve the mystery, because a lot of people who are not familiar with the US kind of political and legal system, have this concern of what if the president can just have a quick say and then the law would suddenly change to a whole different level. It's really about calibrating information like this to the right level of concern. And a lot of people would say this is a nothing burger, nothing's going to happen. But I think with the right mind, there could be something. But not entirely what investors are expecting. So I do wanted to go a little further on Trump's power of, changing the laws. Obviously, he doesn't have legislative power or judicial power, but with his executive power, what exactly can he do in regard to the immigration system implemented in the US?
Let's go back a little again. Through the Constitution of the United States from the founding fathers 250 so years ago, they set up three divisions of government to keep checks and balances so that not one division can carry on and take over the whole country. As a result, the office of the president, the administration, and the executive wing has limitations on what they can do. Congress has its limitations, and they've got to pass through a law that goes through all of the steps to get something through the system, which can often take months or years. And then there's the Supreme Court, which has the ability to cancel out anything Congress does as being unconstitutional and to cancel out anything that the president does as being unconstitutional. Congress can then write a law which overrides whatever the Supreme Court might have said, but the president cannot override either of those. So while he has this executive order authority and power, it still is limited to what the Congress and or the Supreme Court will say about having it. They can simply say no and show reason, and it will be a court case or it'll be a representations to Congress, but it can't just happen because he signs off on a piece of paper. Some things he can do. He can start this gold card, we believe, but we're not quite sure of how it can ever get worked. And certainly in the address to Congress, I think it was 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, he said, we're going to have this in the next few weeks. Now, that's the next few weeks after the 2 weeks he promised it at that meeting we spoke about, which took place 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of thing that our president has an ability to say things and hope that they'll fall into place, but some things just will not and cannot be done. So with the gold card, maybe we'll have a gold card. Maybe he'll manage to find an exemption to push it through by executive order, but he certainly cannot push aside or stop EB-5.
Thank you. I think that definitely helped a lot of investors to understand a little bit more about what kind of power he has and what kind of action he could take under those powers. So, I mean, you've definitely touched on this, but I do wanted to zoom back in to the impact of this gold card or possible any modification of EB-5 on the current system that we have. So if, say, in the extreme case that he actually initiated this program of gold card, $5 million gold card, what kind of impact that the current system would have? Like, say, we know that there is a current visa quota for every categories. Do you think that the quota will shrink down because of it, because of the gold card program?
Okay, well, let me start off with this caveat or warning. Mm-hmm. This is very new. Not many people really know what's going on. We have to listen to the words said and try and come to conclusions based on that. With that said, it seems that this will be a separate program and not even an immigration program. So we're not worried about it in quota number or the visa availability. And we're not worried about it even being filled up, because if you look at it practically, count the number of billionaires around the world, then count the number of millionaires around the world, and how many of them have $5 million sitting ready to pay to the US government as a gift, and then come to the US, and then they're faced with the possibility of being taxed on their worldwide income. Now, this is one of the promises being made, but it's spoken about so simply that, oh, well, we will make sure gold card visa holders will not pay tax on worldwide income, only tax on the US income. Stroke of a pen cannot do that very easily either. I believe an amendment to the tax laws also has to go through an act of Congress or somewhere fitting into the laws and go through a formal regulation promulgated by the IRS. So I don't see that becoming an easy solution. So let's talk about Maybe there will be a freedom of tax on worldwide income, maybe there won't.
Mhm.
If there's not, or there's uncertainty, none of these EB-5 billionaires are going to want to expose themselves to that kind of taxation. If you look at the Russian oligarchs or you look at the um, Middle Eastern princes and they don't want to pay money on the billions or millions or trillions of dollars they make in their home countries and around the world to the US government because they're sitting with a green card. It just does not have the value for them. So I think we faced with a couple of things. One, it's not very attractive. Two, there are not many people at this level of attractiveness, even with the tax benefit, who have this kind of money that they're willing to invest in this way. And the numbers that the government of the US are talking about, the Secretary of Commerce and the President, to reach trillions is just so out of reach and out of hand that my suggestion, this is pure my opinion, if he gets 10 investors in the first year, he's done well. If he goes 100, he's done fantastically. He's talking about thousands. He's talking about if he opens this up, they'll be lining up and taking numbers at his door to get these visas. And I don't see that happening at all. And then the impact on the current EB-5, I've said already, I think it's going to have a zero impact. It has a scare impact for the beginning, but we've got other things to look at with the EB-5s, and we'll come to that a little later in the questions. But EB-5 is here to stay, in my opinion, and at least until its sunset on September 30th, 2027. And then we'll talk about another date of September 2026 in a little while. So any further questions on this issue, please tell me and I'll answer.
You are way ahead of me. What you have mentioned is just on the next slide. So
Uh-huh.
definitely, it sounds like now this topic is still new. A lot of things are still up in the air. So a lot of things we covered today is like personal perspective. It's not setting concrete. Of course, I think our audience understand that, but definitely still they have concerns. They are worried about possible price change, or even for our existing EB-5 investors, they're worrying about whether the rule will change even if they had already submitted their application. So would you walk us through the grandfathering clause of the EB-5 so our investors can understand this a little bit better?
Sure. I alluded to the September 30th, 2026 date a moment ago. In the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of March 2022, they built in this grandfathering. What it means is if anyone files I-526 or I-526E, individual investor application, before that date in 2026, they are guaranteed that even if the program sunsets and comes to an end, they will still have their cases completed by the USCIS under this guarantee provision. So if we want to go back in history, a couple of years ago when the program sunset, all the EB-5 cases under regional center got frozen. Now that won't happen again for those who file before September 30, 2026. Those who file in the fifth year of this extended program run a risk that if it doesn't get extended and it's not fully adjudicated by the time it sunsets, they could be out of luck and not be able to finish their program. So grandfathering is a very valuable thing. And one of the reasons I will suggest now, maybe later again, file your cases earlier rather than later. Make sure you're well within this 4-year period and guarantee the completion of your case. As far as the price increase is concerned, well, that's already built into RIA. There's a cost of living increase that I believe takes place in the fifth year, and therefore we're not going to get there if they don't renew the regional centre program. And if we do, it's specifically based on cost of living, and therefore only a small percentage increase will take place. It's not going to be a huge increase like trying to match a $5 million green card. So I would not be at all worried about that. The worry is minimal in terms of 800,000 or 1,050,000, it won't exceed 50,000. That's 5 or 10%. It's not likely. So that's how I see it at this stage on those two items.
Thank you so much. I think that's very insightful and informative for our investors. So I guess I have a follow-up question. I guess, is it fair to recommend our investors to file as soon as possible, just to kind of prevent any possible changes in the future, just so they can lock in the current regulation as well as the prices?
Multiple reasons. One is the regulations and this guarantee term. The second is, what if EB-5 gold card somehow does cause a problem? If you're in, you'll fall under that guarantee. So even if the gold card knocks out EB-5, those who are in are in. So it's a further recommendation to do so. We also have issues like the quota number. If you run out of quota numbers, you won't be able, if you're in the US, to do an adjustment of status concurrently with your filing. And you have to just wait out until visa numbers become available. So you want to get in as quickly as possible. That's probably it. And again, price rises is not a major consideration.
Okay. Awesome. And also today, this morning, we have looked at the Visa Bulletin of this month, and we were very surprised to notice that the original EB-5, or the old EB-5, quote unquote, has been, the backlog actually reversed back to, for I mean, specifically for Chinese mainland people who were born in China mainland, the backlog reversed back to 2014, and that was a very surprise. For a lot of investors out there who have been waiting for years. So we're very eager to learn more about that. And would you mind to kind of share more of your perspective on that issue?
Well, this is a very hot news and hot issue. The Visa Bulletin, I think, only came out today, maybe yesterday. And what happens, put China in the unsegregated capacity category. That's the old category before RIA, 2.5 years back. Now, there's commentary on this, and this is generally unheard of. You don't see things going back that far, and people are asking the reason. And the reason is that the US State Department wants to cut off any new EB-5s coming through under that category at the moment, because they've given out potentially too many. So they don't want any to slip through. So they moved it back far enough to stop any of those that are in the background, even could have filed next month, to stop them from filing. And I would say that if there are any visa numbers that become available, we should look to maybe August and September of this year, if there's a trickle of numbers to come back into this category. Otherwise, expect it to be stuck there for the remainder of this government fiscal year, which ends on September 30 of 2025. So that's the sort of background to it. It has not yet impacted the segregated cases. So those people who filed after RIA, which is after March of 2022, still will be able to get their visa numbers. But we know from reports coming through that China have taken up a lot of numbers, and there's expectation that even the segregated categories will be backed up. We're expecting the TEAs to back up instantly, and the rurals to take a bit longer. So we need to watch that as well. And the idea then is file as soon as possible. If you're legally in the US and are entitled to file, get that done so you can get your adjustment of status pending, which means in 6 months or less, you will get a work card and a travel card, which is as close to a green card as you're going to get while you're waiting for your green card to come through under a now or future backup visa category system. So comes back to the suggestion earlier of file as soon as possible. It can only be to your advantage.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I think that it's a great advice to give to any investors who are interested or in filing an EB-5 petition. And this is probably a really good time to take actions before anything changes, because anything can happen in this administration, or maybe nothing can happen in the administration. Everything's kind of up in the air. And that's all of the questions that we prepared for this section. And I do wanted to take a brief moment uh, to kind of have a little conclusion on and sort of on the gold card. So it's probably still we're waiting for more details to come out, and it's approaching the 2 week mark as Trump initially suggested in the announcement, but it doesn't seem like anything is moving forward. And we do want our investors to know that this is a good time to take actions, and it's a good to file as quick as possible. Mr. Hirson, do you have any other additional advice or suggestion you would like to share on this topic?
Sure. I just repeat that it's early days, nothing is clear. People mustn't forget that this is a gift or a donation to the government, not an investment. That wasn't totally clear at the beginning, and people were asking, well, what's the return and when's the return and how's the return? Well, be clear, there's no return. And that is certainly a negative factor because at least you have a chance of a return under EB-5, provided the project goes through as planned in its business plan. And most of the projects today seem to be succeeding. The older ones, perhaps not, but the newer ones are being very carefully selected. And with the penalties under the new EB-5 law, people are being super cautious. We have a company that is just doing compliance, and we have some regional centers we own just to license, and we are doing the compliance there. And I have a team of compliance officers and people whose function it is to watch for the compliance. So I think EB-5 is a lot safer than it was 2 years ago, and people can take advantage of that. And then the bottom line is back to the suggestion of filing to get in under the guarantee under the existing law, which the administration cannot sign away by executive. And other than that, I thank you again for inviting me. And as we get further along the way, I invite you to send your questions to Willow and her team, and they'll forward them to me, and I'll respond as easily and quickly as I can, and be available to everyone to assist with whatever's needed. We can do every aspect of EB-5 in our offices. We have a full team. We have 7 lawyers, 3 Chinese speaking. So if you need help in that regard, Willow and her team will direct you where they feel it's best.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that generous introduction of us. And also, I would just like to take a moment to kind of bring more information of EB-5 to our audience. You're free to chime in anytime if there's any additional information you would like to add. And we will have a Q&A section at the end. And I will read out the question to you, and then we'll see how we can address those. So let's move on to the EB-5 introduction. So I'm hoping that most of our audience have a more or less of a background information on EB-5 visa. So basically, this program was created by Congress in 1990, as Mr. Hirson alluded to at the beginning of this conversation. So each year they have a quota of 10,000 visas granted to foreign citizens, and the requirement is that the foreign citizen would invest in a new commercial enterprise in the U.S., and then the investment will create or preserve 10 full-time permanent jobs for U.S. workers. So under the new model, quote unquote, new model of 2022, the EB-5 is currently the fastest route to the U.S. permanent residency and citizenship for investors and their spouse and any children under 21. And the EB-5 grants investors the ability to live, work, and study anywhere in the United States without any qualifications or restrictions. And depending on the project selected, investors should eventually receive a full return of their EB-5 investment. So like Mr. Hirson had mentioned, this one you can actually expect to receive your money back. Unlike the gold card, which is a donation, which means that the money is going to be gone for you. You're not going to see them ever again. And for the EB-5 RIA, which was enacted in 2022, there are something changed from the old EB-5. So the U.S. Congress extended program for another 5 years until September of 2027, which has a embedded grandfathering clause, which we had covered previously. Which means that if investors submit their application before September 2026, they will be protected and under the current and existing laws. And the current system, they had enhanced oversight reporting, which made the program a lot safer compared to 2 years ago. And the new program has three new set aside visa categories, which is rural and HUA, high unemployment area, and also infrastructure. And what is really important about this new program is it's available for investors to file concurrently. What does this mean is that if the investor is already within the United States and they hold a valid non-immigrant status like F1 visa or B-type visa, they can simultaneously file I-485 and I-5260 at the same time. So what does that mean is that they can also apply for work authorization and a travel document. With these two, they can potentially work for any employer in the U.S. without restrictions, and they can also travel in and out the U.S. with the document. So while they're waiting for their green card to be approved, they have a valid status and a document to be able to work and live in the U.S. without restrictions. And a little note to mention to our investors, if you are entering the US with an F visa or a B visa, you need to stay in the US for at least 90 days to be able to file for a EB-5 petition. And now that ends our planned program. We're going into the Q&A session. I see we have a lot of great questions in the comment section. I'm just going to read it to you, Mr. Hirson, and we'll go from there. Okay. So we have a question. Okay, so the first question is about the backlog. We have addressed that already. Okay, here's the one. Under the creation of the Bitcoin strategic reserve, do you see any possibility of being able to pay in Bitcoin for this program?
Um, we don't know because the administration has created this new cyber currency program and a reserve fund, and the Treasury is going to have Bitcoin. So it is within the realm of possibility. At this stage, I'd say any Bitcoin attempted investment will be subject to a couple of things. One, it will need to be converted into US dollars before it gets to the project. And two, you're going to have to prove the source of your Bitcoin through the lawful source of funds report. And knowing Bitcoin is as anonymous as it is, I don't think you will be able to prove that very easily. Where did the money come from? How did it get into Bitcoin? Show us your full Bitcoin account. Show us where the money came out of the Bitcoin account. I believe it'll be extremely difficult from a practical standpoint, to get through the system.
Another of our audience asked, under the Trump administration, will investors who are doing installments uh, versus paying full payments have a higher chance of getting RFE or even NOID?
No, I don't think so. It's simply a matter of what is put into the application. I've done many installment or part payment applications where we've had no RFE. It's got to be properly documented. You have to establish that the individual had the available money. It can't be coming from future earnings or dividends or promises of some profit. It can come from real estate that is going to be sold if you can show the net value of that real estate. In other words, some level of appraised value minus the debt that might still attach to that property. So you have a net amount of money and some indication that that asset is realizable within a reasonable period to be able to be sent on to the project to complete the actual investment. You then have to show that that asset came from a lawful source of funds in great detail. Now, while there's a recent court case that I think is in the last 4 weeks, which appeared to make the source of funds a little less burdensome. We're not seeing anything like that coming out of the RFEs and other requests from government yet. So that's going to have to evolve a little. So expect that people paying not all down at once, who don't fully prove the source of funds of the money to come in, are going to get RFEs.
Thank you. We also have a question regarding the backlog. So other than the 900 days on the old EB-5 cases, the backlog, can you kind of foresee, will that happen to the new EB-5 cases, especially that Trump is pushing his gold card? Can he use his bureaucratic means to delay cases from being approved?
Somewhat speculative, somewhat calculated, certainly nothing definite. My opinion on the gold card is it will have no effect, I mean, an initial ripple effect, which is just an emotional thing on EB-5, because it cannot directly affect it. It's not going to have any quota number under the existing numbers, and it has no limitation as currently presented. So I don't think there'll be any concern that the gold card is going to negatively impact EB-5 other than just so minimally and so short term, on such a short term, I would not be worried about it.
Thank you. We have another question from our audience. Is there a way Trump can use executive order or any means to temporarily halt the EB-5 processing or case filing? If that happens, when or if we will expect an injunction from the federal judges?
Well, directly, no. You can't do an executive order to do anything against EB-5. But indirectly, he's doing it, and he did it in his first term. He told immigration to do excessive deep review of all adjudications. What did this do? It slowed down the adjudications so badly in that 4 years that we haven't yet recovered from the slow adjudication. And he's done it again. And what this does to immigration, it seems that they take this as a license to do whatever they like, deny cases that shouldn't be denied, put out RFEs where they shouldn't be put out, all under cover of this order while we're doing our job properly. And this is a real problem, and there's nothing we can do about it. We're facing it, it's already there, and it's not going to easily change.
Thank you so much for answering this question. So we have a couple of more, and I'm just gonna read them. And thank you again for, it's a really informative, and then it's some perspective a lot of our investors have never been exposed to. So our next question is that there are rumors saying Trump might increase the application fee to $4.2 million, and this increase does not have to go through the complicated process of going through the Congress. What do you think about the possibility of that happening?
So, for clarification, increasing the filing fees,
Mhm.
is that what we said?
Yeah. So, yeah, the filing fee. Yeah.
Well, when they increased the last filing fees in April of last year, they faced several court cases. The immigration happened to win the court cases because they followed what they showed to the courts and satisfied the courts was a very clear process of why the fees had to be what they were. They were substantially increased. The filing when I-526 moved from 3,000 or 8,000 to 12,000. The filing of some of the project documents moved from 18,000 to 48,000. But there was a big fuss about it, a big fight. It has to go through the proper APA process. It's got to be advertised in the Federal Register. It's got to be open for comment. If it doesn't, it'll be stopped by court orders so fast they won't know it's happened. So if that's a real fear of your audience, I would say I would not be worried about that. I'd be more worried about the slow adjudication of the officers causing us more of a headache than ridiculous increase in fees as a kind of a penalty. The court will throw that out instantly.
Okay. Great, thank you. And we have one last question. So our audience said, we are hearing some news about U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USAS, had laid off approximately 50 employees as part of a broader federal workforce reductions. Do you think this will affect the EB-5 processing time?
Minimally, yes, because the EB-5 program is a self-funded program. In other words, the fees we pay pays for the salaries. So by laying off any of the investment programs employees is not doing anything for the treasury because their money is not taken out of the treasury. So it's an exercise incorrectly applied if they do. Now, we've been told that there has been some impact on the investment program. We don't think very much because if they, the number is 50, and I can't confirm that, but if we say it's 50, and they've got thousands of employees, only several hundred are in the investor program. So of the 50, maybe 10 get lost. So I don't think it's a material number that's going to major impact on the processing of investor cases. Once again, the major impact is going to be coming from the administration's order, literally, in other words, to go slow.
Thank you. That is for all of our questions. I think definitely we had a lot of questions tripling in and great answers from Mr. Hirson. Thank you very much for joining us today again. And yeah, before we conclude today's webinar, is there any other advice, suggestions, or any last comment that you would like to share with our audience today? Sorry, I have one more questions coming in just right now. So from the perspective of investment security, will the current EB-5 project be safer than the previous one?
Well, there's no impact from the gold card. The impact is from Maria in March 2022. And I'd say that investments are substantially safer just because of the structure, because there are more projects out there than there are investors. Investors are being much more selective. The migration agents are being very selective. They don't want the responsibility of having to explain to the investor, we know your money was at risk, we warned you of all the dangers, sorry, yours didn't work. They want to be able to say to the investors, maybe it's been delayed a year or your money's coming back on time. So I would say these forces will compel the program to be safer. And as I said earlier, we are seeing a much safer whole attitude towards there isn't the laissez-faire of do what you like and don't worry about it, and we'll steal the money and run. We haven't seen much of that at all since March of 2022. So basically, you've definitely got a safer program.
Thank you. I think that's definitely a great news for our investors to know. And yeah, I think that really it's a good conclusion for today's conversation. And I'm sorry, I think I cut you off a little bit earlier before this question. If there's anything additional you would like to share, feel free to kind of open mic again.
Well, thank you. Yes, once again, thank you for inviting me. And secondly, I must be repetitive on file as soon as possible. Get in under the guarantee, and then it'll work its way out. Select your project carefully and work with the right migration agents and again with the right immigration lawyers.
Great. Thank you so much. It was definitely an honor to have you on this webinar, and truly, we really appreciate all the insights and comments on all of the questions and the great answers. And I'm sure our audience will learn a lot through this webinar as well. So it's a good point that we can conclude today's webinar. And for our audience, if you're not registered through a consultant, you can click on the link that has been put in the comment section, and you can reach out to us for more questions, for more insights and information. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hirson.
Thank you. You're
Thank you.
welcome.